If you really want to lead a country, you must never be afraid of any danger you would ask your soldiers to face. With these words, Ibrahim Traore would the very next morning hide who he was and personally join the attack on Burkina Faso's most dangerous terrorist camp. The meeting room in the underground part of the president's palace in Ouagadougou became very quiet as Ibrahim Traore looked at the satellite pictures spread in front of him. The president of Burkina Faso, still in his mid-30s, had the serious focus of someone who had spent most of his adult life in military work. "How many regular people are being held?" he asked, not looking up from the pictures. General Ouedraogo cleared his throat. "At least 40, Mr. President. Mostly women and children from the villages of Solhan and Totogat. We believe they're being used as human shields." The terrorist camp was in a faraway area of northern Burkina Faso, near the Mali border. For years, it had been a base for attacks on villages, military posts, and mining operations. 3 times before, they had tried to destroy it, but failed. Many soldiers died, and they didn't win. Defense Minister Kabor spoke next. "The camp is well protected, sir. They have big weapons, probably from Libya's old weapons. Guards are watching from the hills around it. They have many ways to escape." Traoré nodded slowly, his face showing nothing about what he was thinking. "And the hostages are kept here." He pointed to a group of buildings on the northwest edge of the camp. "Yes, sir. That's what our spies tell us." Traoré stood up straight, looking at each of the 6 military leaders in the room. These were his most trusted commanders, fighters who had fought with him before he became president. "I've made a decision," he said, his voice calm but strong. "Operation Desert Hawk will happen tomorrow at 2 a.m. Special Forces Team Alpha will lead the mission. The main goal stays the same: save the hostages, then destroy the camp." The commanders nodded. This was expected. What Traoré said next was not, "I will personally go with Team Alpha." The silence that followed was complete. Then all at once, voices exploded. "Mr. President, that's impossible. The risk is too dangerous. Security rules say you can't." Traoré raised his hand, and the protests stopped right away. "My decision is final. I will not ask our forces to take risks I won't take myself. This operation is too important to leave completely to others. I need to see for myself what our troops face in the field." General Ouedraogo, the most senior officer there and Traoré's former commander, stepped forward. "Sir, with the greatest respect, you are no longer just a soldier. You are the head of state. If you are captured or killed, it would be a disaster for our nation." Traoré's face softened a little. "I understand your worry, General, but think about the message this sends. Not just to our enemies, but to our own people and forces. A leader who fights alongside his men earns a different kind of respect than one who gives orders from far away." He turned to the map of the target area. "I won't be in charge of the operation. That stays Captain Zongo's job. I'll be there as a watcher and helper, not to change tactical decisions in the field." Defense Minister Kabor, who had served with Traoré for years before he became president, knew that look in his leader's eyes. The decision was final. He changed his approach. "Then we must set up strict rules, sir. Communications, escape plans, backup plans." Traoré nodded, agreed. "And this stays completely secret. No one outside this room can know about my participation until after the operation is done. The official record will show that I'm visiting the eastern provinces overnight." The meeting continued for another 2 hours as they worked out the details. When it ended, Traoré asked General Ouedraogo to stay behind. Once they were alone, the older man spoke with the honesty that only their decade-long friendship allowed. "Ibrahim, this is not necessary. You have nothing to prove." Traoré moved to the window that looked out onto the palace gardens, currently covered in late afternoon sunlight. "This isn't about proving anything, old friend. It's about understanding. How can I make decisions that send our young men and women into danger if I've forgotten what that danger feels like?" He turned back to face the general. "Besides, there's something about this camp that doesn't make sense. 3 failed operations against a fixed position. Our forces are better than that. I need to see for myself what we're missing. The general studied him for a moment. You suspect something, perhaps. Reports show they're getting more skilled in their tactics. New weapons are appearing that we can't trace. Someone is helping them, and I want to know who. As night fell over Ouagadougou, Traoré sat alone in his private rooms, writing letters. One to his sister, recently found and brought to safety after years of separation. One to his closest advisor, with instructions to follow if he did not return. The third, addressed to the people of Burkina Faso, he sealed in an envelope marked to be opened only if I die. Just after midnight, he changed from his formal clothes into standard military clothing without any signs of rank. A knock at the door meant his security chief had arrived. The transport is ready, Mr. President. Team Alpha is preparing at the staging area. Thank you, Kabor. Remember, complete secrecy. As far as anyone knows, I'm asleep in my rooms, and not to be disturbed until morning. The trip to the northern military base was made in a plain vehicle, with dark windows. No presidential motorcade, no formal procedures. When they arrived, Traoré was immediately taken to a secure hangar, where 24 members of Special Forces Team Alpha were doing final equipment checks. Captain Zongo, the team commander, approached and gave a sharp salute. Mr. President, while I respect your decision, I must formally state my objection to your participation in this mission. Traoré returned the salute. Objection noted. Captain, now brief me on the final approach plan. For the next hour, he was included in the team's preparation. Though it had been some years since his active combat days, Traoré's muscle memory returned quickly as he checked his equipment, reviewed hand signals, and studied the latest intelligence updates. The team would go in by helicopter, landing 5 kilometers from the target to avoid being detected. From there, they would walk through rough terrain, approaching the camp from the east, where the rocky landscape provided the best cover. At 1:30 a.m., the team got on 2 Black Hawk helicopters. As the aircraft lifted off into the night sky, felt a familiar feeling, the focused calm that comes before combat. Around him, the Special Forces operators stayed professionally silent, though he could sense their mixture of pride and worry at having their president among them. The flight was kept low to avoid radar detection. No words were exchanged over the intercom except essential communications. At the designated drop point, the helicopters touched down just long enough for the teams to get off before disappearing back into the night sky. Under a moonless sky, Team Alpha began their approach. March, Traoré, positioned in the middle of the group, moved with the practiced quiet of a veteran soldier. Night vision equipment showed the harsh landscape, rocky hills, sparse plants, dry stream beds, the kind of terrain that had defined Burkina Faso's northern borders for centuries. 2 hours of careful movement brought them to the ridge overlooking the terrorist camp. Captain Zongo signaled for the team to take watching positions. Traoré settled beside him, using high-powered binoculars to study the layout below. The camp was larger than the satellite images had suggested. Multiple buildings formed circles around a central area. Armed guards patrolled the edges, but their pattern seemed irregular, almost careless. Something wasn't right. Captain, Traoré whispered, those guards aren't following proper security rules. Look at their movements. Zongo watched for several moments. You're right, sir. They're too casual, too confident. As if they're not expecting an attack. Traoré finished the thought. Or they're prepared for one, Zongo concluded grimly. Traoré felt a chill that had nothing to do with the pre-dawn desert air. Change of plans. I want heat scanning of the entire area, and send 2 men to check that ridge to the north. There should be a guard post there, but I'm not seeing any movement. While they waited for the scouts to return, Traoré continued his observation. The cluster of buildings where intelligence said the hostages were being held showed no signs of activity. No guards, no movement, no light. When the scouts returned 20 minutes later, their report confirmed his suspicion. No enemies on the northern ridge, sir, but we found this. The soldier handed Zongo a small device, who then passed it to Traoré. It was a sophisticated motion sensor, European manufacturer. Not the kind of equipment typical terrorist groups in the region had access to. And the heat scan? Traoré asked. Something's wrong, sir, replied the team's technology specialist. I'm getting cold spots where there should be heat signatures. The hostage buildings, they're empty. Traoré's mind worked rapidly, connecting pieces. It's a trap. They knew we were coming. He turned to Zongo. Abort the mission. Get the team back to the extraction point immediately. Before Zongo could relay the order, a blinding light suddenly lit up the ridge where they were positioned. The roar of vehicles and shouts in several languages, including French, echoed through the night. Ambush, Zongo called out, but it was too late for a clean retreat. The next few minutes were chaos. Automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions below. Team Alpha responded with disciplined counterfire, but they were surrounded and outnumbered. Fall back to position, Echo Zongo commanded, referring to a defensive location they had identified during planning. Protective formation around the HVT, the high-value target. Traore. As the team began their tactical withdrawal, Traoré found himself at the center of a moving circle of Special Forces operators. His combat training kicked in automatically. Move low, move fast, return fire only when necessary to save ammunition. They had covered perhaps 200 meters when an explosion rocked the ground ahead of them. The blast was followed by heavy machine gunfire that cut off their planned escape route. They've guessed our fallback position, Zongo shouted over the noise. We need to split up. Traoré knew the captain was right. A single large group was too easy to target. Do it, he confirmed. 3 teams will meet at the secondary extraction point. Zongo quickly divided the unit. Team 1 with the president, teams 2 and 3 provide cover fire, then separate withdrawal routes. As the teams prepared to split, Traoré made a decision. I'm going with team 3. Zongo looked stunned. Sir, protocol says, protocol won't matter if none of us make it out. Traoré cut him off. They'll expect me to be with the largest group, or the best protected one. Team 3 has the most difficult escape route. They'll be looking for me, their least. Before Zongo could protest further, Traoré continued, This isn't a request, Captain, Team 3, now. Minutes later, Traoré was moving through the rocky terrain with just 5 operators. The sounds of intense firefights echoed from where Teams 1 and 2 were creating the diversion. The trick seemed to be working. No pursuit had yet appeared behind them. The team leader, Lieutenant Sankara, led them through a dry stream bed that offered cover from both sight and fire. They moved in silence, communicating only through hand signals. Traoré kept pace, his breathing controlled despite the effort and tension. After nearly an hour of evasive movement, they reached a small cave that had been identified in pre-mission planning as a potential safe house. Lieutenant Sankara posted 2 men as lookouts, while the rest of them took shelter inside. Status report, Traoré requested once they had established temporary security. Teams 1 and 2 have both reported successful escape, Sankara informed him after checking his secured communications device. They're proceeding to separate rally points. 2 casualties reported, 1 minor, 1 serious but stable, and the hostages. Any confirmation? Sankara's expression darkened. Negative, sir. Captain Zongo conducted a remote heat scan of the entire camp during withdrawal. No civilian heat signatures detected. It appears the hostage situation was fake to lure us in. Traoré absorbed this information with a grim nod. His suspicion had been correct. The entire operation had been compromised from the start. But how, and by whom? The lieutenant continued, Sir, we've analyzed the weapon sounds from the ambush. Not standard terrorist weapons. We identified French Pharma's rifles and what sounded like Belgian FN Minimi. European weapons, Traoré mused, in the hands of supposed regional terrorists. Interesting. He moved to the mouth of the cave, looking out at the lightning horizon. Dawn was approaching. Did you get visual confirmation of any of the attackers? Yes, sir. Mixed group, local fighters, but also several white individuals. Military bearing, not contractors. The pieces were falling into place. Special forces, French most likely, possibly with Belgian support. He turned back to Sankara. This wasn't a terrorist trap. This was a state-sponsored operation. The realization hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just an attempt to eliminate a troublesome terrorist cell. It was an attempt to eliminate him, the president of Burkina Faso, a president who had recently nationalized foreign-owned gold mines, expelled foreign military bases, and begun charting an independent course for his resource-rich nation. Communications check, Traoré ordered. I need to speak to Defense Minister Kabor immediately. While one of the operators established a secure connection, Traoré considered his options. The presence of European Special Forces operators on Burkina soil without authorization, conducting what appeared to be an assassination attempt disguised as a counter-terrorism operation. This was an act of war. Yet direct confrontation with former colonial powers was not a battle Burkina Faso could win through conventional means. This would require a different approach. When the connection to the Defense Ministry was established, Traoré spoke concisely. Minister Kabor, Operation Desert Hawk, was compromised. European Special Forces, present at the target site. Prepare Protocol Sunlight immediately. Authorization Code, Sankara Delta. Protocol Sunlight was a backup plan developed for exactly this scenario. Undeniable evidence of foreign military intervention on Burkina's soil. It involved immediate diplomatic media and military responses, all carefully planned to expose the violation without escalating to open conflict. Understood, Mr. President, came the minister's voice, tight with concern. Are you secure? Affirmative. Proceeding to Extraction Point Delta with Team 3. Expected arrival 7:30 a.m. Sir, backup forces are standing by. Should we deploy? Traoré considered this. Negative. The engagement is over. They've withdrawn. This was a targeted operation. After ending the communication, Traoré addressed the team. We move in 10 minutes. New mission parameters. Collect evidence. I want shell casings, equipment, anything that attackers left behind. Documentation is now as important as extraction. As they prepared to move out, Lieutenant Sankara approached him. Sir, permission to speak freely. Always, Lieutenant. What you did tonight, choosing to come on this mission, it was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen a commander do. The young officer paused. But I understand why you did it now. You suspected a trap. Traoré nodded. Not specifically this trap, but something felt wrong about the intelligence. Too convenient, too precise. When information seems too good to be true in our line of work, it usually is. Sankara finished the thought. The team moved out at first light, carefully backtracking toward the ambush site. The attackers had withdrawn, as Traoré had predicted. They collected spent shell casings, abandoned equipment, and most valuably, clear boot prints that matched NATO's standard military issue. By mid-morning, they had reached the extraction point, where a helicopter waited to return them to Ouagadougou. As they lifted off, Traoré looked down at the harsh landscape below, thinking of the centuries of foreign intervention that had shaped his country's history. Today was supposed to have been another chapter in that long story, the elimination of a troublesome African leader who dared to reclaim his nation's resources. Instead, it would become a turning point. Back in the capital, Traoré wasted no time. Still in his dust-covered combat clothes, he called an emergency meeting of his Security Council. The evidence collected was laid out before them: French and Belgian ammunition, communications equipment, photographs of boot prints with NATO treads. This was not a terrorist camp, Traoré explained to his assembled ministers and generals. It was a killing box designed specifically to eliminate our Special Forces team, and I believe, me personally, Defense Minister Kabor reported on the implementation of Protocol Sunlight. Foreign media has been alerted. Our evidence is being transmitted to the African Union, ICAS, and the UN Security Council. The French ambassador has been summoned to explain his government's actions. And the public announcement? Traoré asked. Prepared as directed, sir. Awaiting your approval to broadcast. Traoré nodded. Schedule it for 6 p.m. prime viewing time. I want every citizen of Burkina Faso to understand exactly what happened today. That evening, still bearing the dust and fatigue of combat, Ibrahim Traore addressed his nation. He stood not behind a desk in formal clothes, but in his military uniform, the reality of his overnight mission evident in every aspect of his appearance. "People of Burkina Faso," he began, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "Last night I joined our special forces on what we believed was a mission to rescue hostages from a terrorist camp. What we discovered instead was a carefully laid trap, not by terrorists, but by foreign special forces operating illegally on our soil." He held up one of the shell casings recovered from the ambush site. "This is a 5.56mm round manufactured in Belgium, fired from a weapon that our regional terrorist groups do not possess. We recovered dozens like it, along with other evidence that definitively proves European military presence at this supposed terrorist location." The camera pulled back to show a table covered with the collected evidence, methodically arranged. "Let me be absolutely clear," Traoré continued, his voice taking on an edge of controlled anger. "This was an assassination attempt, thinly disguised as a counter-terrorism operation. The target was not just your president, but Burkina Faso's sovereignty itself." He paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in. "Since our government reclaimed our gold mines from foreign control, since we began charting an independent course for our nation's resources, certain powers have viewed us as a threat to their continued exploitation of African wealth. Last night, they attempted to solve this problem permanently." Images appeared on a screen behind him, satellite photos showing the camp before and after, evidence of sophisticated equipment, inconsistent with terrorist capabilities, maps indicating the strategic positioning of the ambush forces. "They failed," Traoré stated simply, "and in failing, they have exposed themselves. Today we have lodged formal protests with the United Nations. We have presented our evidence to the African Union, and most importantly, we are sharing the truth with you, the people of Burkina Faso." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intensifying, "to those foreign powers who believe they can still determine African leadership through assassination and intervention. I say this: those days are over. The resources of Burkina Faso belong to the people of Burkina Faso. Our sovereignty is not negotiable. Our right to self-determination is not subject to your approval." The address continued for another 15 minutes as Traoré outlined the diplomatic, economic, and security measures being implemented in response to the night's events. When he concluded, he did something unprecedented. He opened the palace gates and walked out to meet the crowds that had spontaneously gathered. Thousands of citizens had come, drawn by the extraordinary broadcast. As Traoré moved among them, still in his combat clothes, the message was unmistakable. This was a leader who fought alongside his people, who risked what they risked, who would not ask for sacrifices he himself was unwilling to make. In the days that followed, the international response unfolded along predictable lines. The French government denied any involvement, suggesting the evidence had been fabricated. Western media outlets questioned Traoré's account, using terms like alleged and claimed to cast doubt. But within Africa, the reaction was different. Leaders from neighboring nations, Mali, Niger, Chad, expressed solidarity. Some revealed similar experiences with foreign intervention. A movement began to come together around a simple but powerful idea. African resources should benefit African people first and foremost. 1 week after the failed operation, Ibrahim Traore stood at Ouagadougou International Airport, welcoming the presidents of Mali, Niger, and Chad. It was an unprecedented summit, called on short notice, with a single agenda item: the formation of a Sahel Resource Sovereignty Alliance. What they tried to end with bullets, they have instead strengthened with their failure, Traoré told his fellow leaders as they met in the presidential palace. They thought by eliminating one man, they could reverse the course of history. They failed to understand that what we represent is no longer about individuals. It is about a continent awakening to its own power. The alliance they formed that day would reshape regional politics for decades to come. Joint security operations, coordinated resource management policies, unified negotiating positions with foreign investors, all designed to ensure that the wealth beneath African soil would finally benefit African people. For Ibrahim Traore, the night he spent in combat alongside his special forces had nearly cost him his life, yet it had given him something invaluable in return: the moral authority to lead not just a government, but a movement. 6 months later, production at Burkina Faso's gold mines had reached record levels under national management, the revenues now flowing directly to the Burkina treasury rather than foreign shareholders, funded new schools, hospitals, and infrastructure projects across the country. When asked by a journalist if he regretted his decision to personally join the ill-fated raid, knowing now that it had been a trap, Traoré's response was characteristically direct. "I regret the danger faced by the brave soldiers who were with me that night. I regret that foreign powers still believe they have the right to determine African leadership through violence, but I do not regret being there myself." He paused, then added, "A true leader does not ask others to take risks he himself fears to face." That night taught all of us, my soldiers, our people, and those who would control us from abroad, exactly what kind of leadership Burkina Faso has chosen. The raid that had been designed to end Traoré's revolution had instead cemented it, transforming a national policy into a regional movement. The trap had caught not its intended prey, but those who had set it, exposing their methods and motivations to the harsh light of international scrutiny. In presidential palaces and corporate boardrooms across Europe, a new reality was being reluctantly acknowledged. Africa was changing. The old methods of control were failing. Leaders like Ibrahim Traore, willing to put their lives on the line for their principles, could not be intimidated or eliminated as easily as their predecessors. The night of the raid became known throughout Burkina Faso simply as the President's March, the night when their leader had walked into danger alongside common soldiers and returned with both his life and a powerful truth. Those who would rule through fear had reason to fear themselves now. For Traoré, the lesson was equally clear. The path to true independence would be dangerous, perhaps even deadly. Foreign interests would not surrender their privileges without a fight, but as he had discovered in the darkness of that ambush, when the cause was just, even the most carefully laid traps could become opportunities. The war for resource sovereignty had only just begun, but now, at least it was being fought in the open.